Every town, city, region, culture, and country in the world has their own rough and tumble, rugged individual warrior type, a figure that most men in the area will occasionally try to emulate or, at the very least, proclaim their identity with on a t-shirt. In Japan, it was the samurai. In Europe, the knight. In Asia, the Mongols. In the Mediterranean, the Spartans. But in North America, well, we have the cowboy. This rugged, no-nonsense individual was the prototypical man's man, ever ready for whatever life threw at him. The quintessential ideal of masculine American strength. If you were to ask someone about the American West, usually this is the first, if not the only thing they can think of off the top of their head.
Yep.
You nodding along with me? Well, would it interest you to know then that the golden age of the cowboy lasted only about 20 years? Yeah, really. Even though the concept of ranchers working large swaths of land had existed since the vaqueros, or the cowboys that worked the Spanish herds, the American cowboy vanished pretty quickly at the beginning of the 1890s. So even though this lone figure looms high over people's ideas of the area, the American West actually has a far larger, broader, more complicated, and more interesting past, geography, culture, development, and future. So, let's take a look today at the American West. Part 1. Where is the West? Like most areas around the world, the actual location of the West varies greatly depending on your definition. In a previous video, we talked about formal, functional, and perceptual regions, and luckily enough, the West fits all three of these. As a perceptual region, or a region that is defined by the beliefs and ideas of people, the West has changed greatly over the years. From the original early American East Coast colonies, the West was considered anything beyond the Appalachian Mountains. Over time, this idea shifted to areas past the west of the Mississippi River after the American Revolution, and then extended to anything beyond the Great Plains in what was known as the Great American Desert. Exploration and expansion helped to continue to define perceptions of the West, just as connections by wagon, ship, and railway helped define the West as a functional region, or a region defined by transportation and connections. The connections established by the shipping ports on the West Coast, as well as the Transcontinental Railroad, helped define the West in people's minds by its transportation routes and its cities. For our purposes, we are going to stick to the modern, formal region of the West as this area of the United States. To make things simpler for you, here is a list of all the states that we consider to be Western states. Alaska, Arizona, California, Colorado, Hawaii, Idaho, Montana, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Utah, Washington State, and Wyoming. It is the largest region in the United States, and it's far more diverse in terms of geography, culture, and ideas than any other area of the US, with almost 1.87 million square miles of area. So, with all that extra space, what makes the West distinct from other regions of the US? Part 2. Physical characteristics. Everything's bigger out here. The story of the West is not just that of its native peoples, pioneers, prospectors, and cattle, but also that of its vast natural formations, from its snow-capped mountains to swollen rivers, and in between, incredible natural wealth. Taking a look at this topographical map of the region, it becomes immediately apparent that the West is dominated by mountain ranges. From south to north, we start with the Sierra Nevadas, stretching from central and eastern California into western Utah, containing famous peaks such as Mount Whitney, Half Dome, and El Capitan in Yosemite National Park. Towards the east, we have the largest mountain range in North America, the Rocky Mountains. They go from New Mexico through Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Montana, Idaho, even stretching up into southern Alberta and British Columbia. That's over 3,000 miles. The Rockies are home to 96 mountains, and some of them can stretch over 14,000 feet in the air. It's also home to the Continental Divide, a natural feature that determines whether rivers run towards the Pacific Ocean on its western side or towards the Gulf of Mexico and the Atlantic Ocean on its eastern side. The Cascade Mountains stretch from northern California's Lassen Peak all the way into southern British Columbia. It contains the famous Mount Rainier, but what sets these mountains apart from the other ranges we've talked about so far is that the Cascades also contain volcanic peaks. As a matter of fact, all of the volcanic eruptions in the contiguous United States, that just means continuous United States, over the past 200 years have all come from these mountains, including the infamous Mount St. Helens eruption in 1980. The Northern Cascades also are part of the global Ring of Fire formation, where pockets of volcanic activity form a ring around the Pacific Ocean. But we still have an active volcanic range to talk about, and this one has 1.5 million people living right next to it. That's right, we're talking about Hawaii. This 50th state of the Union is located entirely on an island archipelago, or a chain of islands, and all of them were formed by volcanic activity. There are still volcanic eruptions happening here to this day, most often from Mauna Loa, the largest active volcano in the world. Mauna Kea, Kilauea, Hualalai, Loihi, and Haleakala are also active volcanoes on these islands. The last mountain range we're going to talk about is the Alaskan Range, which stretches from the Canadian border through the islands that run into the Pacific Ocean. These mountains also have the tallest peak in North America, which was called Mount McKinley until 1975, when its name was officially changed back to the name given to it by the Koyukon people, Denali, or the Tall One. Ooh. Of course, no discussion of geographical features would be complete without mentioning the Grand Canyon. This 277-mile long, 18-mile wide, and in some places 1-mile deep canyon was and is being carved by the Colorado River. And it's been lived in and around by everyone from the Puebloans, a southwestern First People, to Spanish-American settlers and everyone in between. It is one of the most popular tourist attractions in the United States, and it contains a national park, a national forest, a national monument, and 3 Native American reservations. It's not just mountain ranges and deep valleys that define the West. No, rivers are also plentiful here. Take the longest river in the United States, the Missouri. It begins in western Montana, and when it meets up with the Mississippi just north of St. Louis, it forms the 4th longest river system in the world. Another great tributary to talk about is the Arkansas, which is the 6th longest river in the United States and also forms the largest river basin, or an area of land that's drained by a particular river, in the state of Colorado. Perhaps the most vital river in the West is the Colorado River. Besides carving incredible canyons, the Colorado River also serves as the primary water source for over 50 million people. Another super important river that starts in Colorado is the Rio Grande, which forms an 889-mile long border between the southern United States and northern Mexico. It has served as an important waterway and source of hydroelectric power for both countries. In the rugged Alaskan Range, we find the Yukon River, starting from Canada's Llewellyn Glacier and flowing through southern and central Alaskan state, making it the 3rd longest river in North America. The last major river that we are going to talk about is the Columbia River, residing on the border between Oregon and Washington state. Making up the largest watershed in the Northwest, the Columbia River is an important source of power coming from its many dams, including the Grand Coulee Dam, which is the largest power-producing dam in the United States. That's a lot of rivers, right? But of course, water doesn't just come from rivers and glaciers. No, sooner or later, it's going to fall from the sky. The wide variance of levels of precipitation across the West can really vary the landscape and the human-environment interaction pretty drastically. Rainfall in the West can vary from over 460 inches of rain per year in Mount Waialeale on the island of Kauai in Hawaii to less than 2 inches of rain per year, like in Furnace Creek in Death Valley, California. This lack of rain has allowed Death Valley to long hold the record for driest place in the United States. Though the effects of a changing climate over the past 100 years has caused Death Valley's record to come into peril. In a future lesson, we'll go over the impact a changing climate has had on this vast American region. From vast Arctic tundra in Alaska to cold rainforests in Washington state, the ecological and geographic diversity of this region is simply staggering. But the West isn't just about what's on top of the land. No, there is a significant bounty of natural resources beneath the land as well. Part 3. Natural resources. The tale of natural resources and settlement in the West is really a tale of before the Transcontinental Railroad and after it. We'll go over the railroad in more depth in a future lesson, but to give you a brief overview, the Transcontinental Railroad was the rail line that connected the eastern and central United States. Before that, if people wanted to go out west, they would have to use trails, mostly leaving from Missouri and stopping all along specific points on the West Coast. While the drive to move westward has always been about land, its vast natural resources have also proven to be a great motivation for migration. In 1848, a man named James Marshall discovered gold nuggets and dust in South Fork American River near Coloma, California, at a water-powered sawmill named Sutton's Mill. This discovery triggered a mass migration of well over 300,000 people over the course of just a few years. East of California, in the territory that would later become the state of Nevada, rich veins of silver were discovered in 1858. Huge amounts of the metal were dug up first by people who were a little late to get in on the California gold rush, and then later by large mining companies. While not as famous, the gold rush that captured the imagination of authors such as Jack London was the Klondike, or the Alaskan Gold Rush in the 1890s. Famous for its treacherous route to the gold fields, many more people found success by selling goods there rather than striking it rich. While all of these strikes helped drive migration and influence the American economy, the #1 most important natural discovery in the history of America has got to be oil. From a single Humboldt oil strike in Pennsylvania in 1859, the oil industry helped transform the American economy and its transportative ability throughout the 20th century. Only 60 years after that first oil strike, multiple rich strikes were discovered across the American West, like in Wyoming and Montana. But the largest one in the early 20th century came from the San Joaquin Valley near Los Angeles, California. From 1900 to 1914, California went from producing 5% of the nation's oil to 38%. Over time, though, oil production shifted away from California because new pools of oil were discovered in different locations, like in Texas in the south or in northern Alaska. In the 1960s, the Prudhoe Bay drilling site was estimated to have over 25 billion barrels of recoverable oil beneath its ground. Prudhoe Bay was excavated heavily, and it has since diminished from its peak of excavating over 2 million barrels of oil per day in the late 1980s. Although the excavation has diminished, it's still the largest oil field in North America. While oil is the big news, foresting and fishing have also dominated the Pacific states in the West for thousands of years. Native peoples like the Yakima, the Chinook, and Squamish living in Oregon and Washington state have used the forests to build their villages and the coasts to fish. After the westward migration of the United States, logging companies moved in and utilized rivers to move large amounts of lumber to port cities across the country. To this day, about 20% of American logging happens in Oregon and Washington state. Plus, commercial and recreational fishing is responsible for an estimated 16,000 jobs in Washington state alone. While the incredible financial and economic success of extracting natural resources from the West has transformed the American economy, it doesn't come without its costs. And sometimes those costs on people, animals, and even the land itself can be incredibly high. In another lesson, we're going to talk about the impact of resource extraction and how the rugged, beautiful, and inspiring landscape of the American West led to its protection. Until next time, thanks for watching and keep exploring.